take the blue pill. You take the red pill. Whatever you want to believe.
Swazdilok, you beautiful crackheads. How the hell are ya? Now the first and most important thing I want to say is that I hate you for making me do this video. Out of all the warframes, y'all somehow managed to choose one that I really hate. Almost as much as a dirty rhino. But Tim not here to bitch about that, so let's get this shit over with. Excalibro. Warframes poster boy. I guess, if collecting stamps is one of your exciting hobbies, then Excalibur is the frame for you. Overhyped to be the melee king, this warframe is, despite his mundane existence, able to destroy absolutely everything in his way. By default, Excalibur will grant melee 10% more speed and damage. This passive effect however only applies to swords, dual swords, nakanas and rapiers. Just keep that in mind if you insist on squeezing out a little extra. Now then, first ability. Slash Dash. Despite having been reworked and fixed in the past and being one of the highest damage dealing cheap abilities in the game, Slash Dash is not worth much more than crowd control on higher levels. However, there are some perks to using it. For one, you can use it to get from A to B or to higher places if you so desire. It can also pass you through corpus lasers safely. Or, use it to quickly close the gap between yourself and an enemy. If you smash that E button during a slash dash, you will instantly equip your melee weapon after the animation. I don't know who the fuck actually uses this little trick, but okay, whatever. Also, while slash dashing, your bitch ass is impervious to damage. In other words, you cannot die while slash dashing. Furthermore, slash dash deals mainly slash damage, which means it will be a nightmare for corpus and infested units. If you successfully hit the target with this, you will also knock them down. Which brings me to this fucking shit's problem. You see, in theory slash dash is supposed to work like this. Chaining between multiple enemies and cutting their asses down. If this were always the case, then this ability could be fantastic. In reality this bitch usually works like this though. As you can see, this shit is great but also unreliable as fuck. Which makes it pretty annoying to use in the first place. Now, before you Excalibro mains throw a bitch fit, allow me to express that I am not saying this ability is garbage, although it is. No, I'm only saying that it needs to be refined to live up to its potential. But I digress. You can increase the damage output and crowd controlling by slash dashing with that Exalted Blade without. This way every slash will actually emit an exalted wave which will ultimately hit more enemies with more damage in multiple directions. Obviously, using it in this manner will require modding towards a splash of efficiency. But do whatever the hell you want. Moving on. Radial Blind.
But I cannot see, I'm legally blind.
That's all. Kidding. Honestly, there is not much to say about this ability. Excalibro will emit a flash of light that blinds everything within line of sight at a 25-meter range for 15 seconds. Furthermore, blind enemies will be susceptible to finisher damage. In case you have never heard of covert lethality and a little weapon class called daggers, then perhaps you do not know that Excalibro is capable of killing any level of enemy with one single finisher move, if you use a dagger with that mod equipped. Sure, you can do that if you want, but honestly, most weapons will just one-shot kill anything anyway. Especially hammers. Blind will also pretty much incapacitate all bosses. But there is a catch on one of them. Let grill. If you blind this asshole, then you can forget ever defeating him, as he must be able to see you to open his weak point. But whatever. After all, it is your funeral. Next up, Radial Javelin. This shit right here is rage-inducing. But first, let me give you a list of everything amazing about this ability. Number 1. Excalibro has 3 other abilities, so you don't have to use this one. Okay, that's about it. On paper, this ability deals pretty good and evenly distributed damage.
Bankai.
But in reality, it is flawed beyond repair. For one, this garbage will only target a maximum of 12 enemies regardless of your modification. On top of that, it is based on line of sight, which makes it even less reliable for killing and staggering groups of enemies. Even with a max damage build, your javelins will deal virtually no damage to sortie level enemies. In fact, I am pretty sure that a turtle could deal more damage when it busts a nut. However, that does not make this ability entirely useless. At the very least, it will kill all mini enemies surrounding you and crowd control the survivors. This is especially useful against Corpus and their retarded little Optimus Prime vibrator bots.
Uh-oh, retard alert! Retard alert, class!
Again, this ability won't do shit for you on high levels, but on the mid-range star chart, it will do the trick. Now let's wrap this up with Excalibro's final nerd hero ability. Exalted Blade attack, I mean blade. Excalibro's most known attack. Up until this point, I have shat on Excalibro thoroughly, and you might be led to believe that Calibro is a garbage warframe. Which he absolutely is not. Although he is. But here is the thing, Exalted Blade has a lot more benefits going for it than just the press for brain dead zombie technique. And it would seem that most of you shitty Excalibros do not know of them. So let me try to help. Exalted Blade does not give 2 shits about what melee weapon you have equipped. You can use a scanner versus Nekana Prime and the result will be the same. Therefore, however, it totally does take pretty much all melee mods into account. There are very few exceptions to this, like Syndicate-specific melee mods. Or weapon class specifics like Covert Lethality. I will get to my melee build in a goddamn minute though, so hold your horses. The next juicy thing you need to know about what makes Exalted mode so beastie are a few mechanics. For example, the fact that not only spamming the E button will emit an exalted wave, no, but also aerial and spin attacks. Furthermore, all exalted attacks deal damage up front and a separate but not stacked instance of damage with the wave. The spin attack itself is an attack and not limited to only a fancy dance move to set up the blind. Exalted waves will travel through everything and anything within 40 meters. Exalted waves also suffer from damage drop-off. So the closer you are, the harder you hit. Performing a spin attack while in Exalted mode will blind enemies for half the energy cost of the regular blind, but with only 5 meters in range and about half the duration. So this is a great alternative to engage in small and close groups of enemies. Speaking of engaging enemies, while Pervy Calibro has his thing whipped out, he will automatically deflect incoming fire and reduce incoming frontal damage by 60%. As long as you do not rely on this too heavily, it will definitely make your sissy booty a little more durable. If you channel your Exalted Blade by holding down left mouse button, you can even reflect damage back to the enemy. Now I will not go into more detail on that since we all know that channeling as a whole will bite the dust soon. So let's move on. Ground finishers with Exalted Blade deal 4 times your modded damage. Which is pretty impressive, but it gets better. Performing a standing finisher, for example on a blinded enemy with your Exalted Blade whipped out, will deal 32 times whatever your modified base damage is, as so-called true damage. Which is fucking insane. I mentioned what true damage is in my How to Not Be a Shitty Frost video. So go check that out. For example, in case math is not your thing, if your blades have a base damage of say 2000 damage points, a finisher will deal 64,000 damage. This is why you do not really need to use a dagger with covert lethality. Arcanes will also affect Exalted Blade. Now let's talk tactics. Being a melee-based warframe, you might want to consider using the melee-focused peasant school known as Naraman. In particular the tree, Power Strike. This will help you maintain super high critical damage easily. Now in my opinion, Excalibro is best played in only one way. As a berserker. You will want to stay in exalted mode as long as you need it but not neglect the other abilities while doing so. If you manage to cleverly combine Excalibro's other abilities while you are in exalted mode, then you can truly become a god with him. So here is my generic build for this generic prick. This build does not look like much, but it is plenty to play Excalibro effectively. I use chromatic blade augmentation cause I like to increase my overall corrosive damage. But you can change your energy color to whatever you want. I would recommend orange for fire, as fire will help deal with infested and give you a more obvious crowd control. Hunter Adrenaline will replenish energy even while Exalted is active. So it is a must to help with energy management. And finally I use Arcane Strike. This will trigger more melee speed upon landing hits. Which is perfect. The faster you can swing your thing around the more damage per second you will dish out. Speaking of, let's have a look at my melee build. Since the beginning of time, my go-to weapon for Excalibur has always been the Sindo. Not that it matters. I just like its savage finishers. As you can see, I'm using Drifting Contact to help me keep my combo counter up. You could replace this mob for another elemental if you want to if you are using Naraman's Power Spike. No other combo counter or acolyte mods will affect Excalibro's weapons. So I increased crit damage instead. Amazingly, Condition Overload does in fact work on these exalted weapons, which will synergize nicely with Chromatic Blade. And finally Berserker, which is the driving force behind my insane speed. Now then, this is all there is to say about boring ass Excalibro. I will update this once the Umbra hype has settled. In the meantime, feel free to let me know what warframe or weapon you want me to do next. Now like and subscribe to this shitty channel and fuck off.